Everyone in the village used to say that silence can be a blessing. But sometimes, it can also be a warning. There was a man named Arman who believed that more than anything. He wasn't a bad person, just tired. Tired of noise, tired of arguments, tired of the endless chatter that filled his days and nights. He worked long hours, came home late, and all he wanted was peace. A calm house. A quiet life. A wife who wouldn't question him, wouldn't complain, wouldn't speak unless spoken to. People warned him, of course. "You don't want silence," an old shopkeeper once told him, shaking his head slowly. "You only think you do." But Arman didn't listen. When it came time for him to marry, he rejected every proposal that came his way. Too talkative. Too opinionated. Too lively. Until one day, a stranger arrived in the village with an unusual offer. He spoke softly, almost too softly, as if even his own voice feared being heard. "I know of a girl," he said, looking straight into Arman's eyes. "Beautiful, kind, and completely quiet. She will never argue. She will never raise her voice. She will give you the peace you're searching for." Arman felt like he had found exactly what he had been waiting for. "Why would someone give away such a perfect bride?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his tone. The stranger smiled, but there was something strange about it. Something that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Some blessings," he replied, "are too heavy for one family to carry." That should have been enough to make Arman walk away. But instead it pulled him closer. Within days the marriage was arranged. Her name was Layla. When Arman first saw her, he was stunned. She was even more beautiful than he had imagined. Her eyes were calm, her face peaceful, and she carried herself with a quiet grace that made everything around her seem louder in comparison. And true to the stranger's word, she didn't speak. Not during the ceremony. Not when people congratulated her. Not even when Arman tried to make small talk on their way home. At first it felt perfect. The house was exactly how Arman had always dreamed it would be. No arguments. No complaints. Just silence. He would come home after a long day, and Layla would already have everything prepared. Food on the table. Clothes neatly arranged. Not a single unnecessary word. Days turned into weeks. And slowly, something began to feel different. It wasn't the silence anymore. It was the kind of silence. Because this wasn't peaceful silence. It was heavy. The kind that made you aware of every small sound, the ticking clock, the creak of the floor, the faint whisper of wind through the windows. And Layla, she never spoke. Not even once. At first, Arman found it comforting. Then unusual. Then, unsettling. He started noticing little things. She would stand still for long periods, staring at nothing. Not blinking. Not moving. Just watching. Sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night and find her sitting at the edge of the bed, facing away from him. Completely still. As if she had been there for hours. "Layla?" he once whispered, his voice barely steady. No response. Not even a slight movement. The next morning she acted as if nothing had happened. Arman tried to ignore it. He told himself he was overthinking. This was what he wanted, wasn't it? A quiet wife. A peaceful home. But then, the neighbors started talking. "She never comes outside," one woman whispered. "I've never heard her voice," another added. "Are you sure she's normal?" Arman laughed it off, but deep down their words stayed with him. One evening he decided to test something. He accidentally dropped a glass right behind her. It shattered loudly across the floor. But Layla didn't react. Not even a flinch. That was the moment something inside Arman shifted. Because silence was one thing, but this felt like something else entirely. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the stranger's words. Some blessings are too heavy for one family to carry. What did that mean? And why did it suddenly feel like he hadn't been given peace, but something far more dangerous? As the night grew darker, Arman turned slowly toward Layla. She was lying beside him, perfectly still. But then, without warning, her eyes opened. What? Unblinking. And this time, she wasn't looking away. She was staring directly at him. For the first time since their marriage, her lips began to move. But no sound came out. Not a whisper. Not a breath. Just silence. And somehow, that was far more terrifying than any scream. Arman froze. He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. Layla's eyes stayed locked on his, wide and still, as if she had been waiting for him to notice. Her lips kept moving slowly, forming words that never came out. It was like watching someone speak underwater, close but unreachable. "Layla," he whispered again, his voice shaking this time. The moment he spoke, she stopped. Her lips went still. Her eyes closed just as suddenly as they had opened. And within seconds she looked exactly the same as before, calm, quiet, asleep. But Arman knew what he had seen. Sleep didn't come back to him that night. He stayed awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment again and again. The silence he once loved now felt like something pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. The next day he tried to act normal. Layla moved around the house as usual, preparing food, cleaning, doing everything perfectly. Not once did she look at him for too long. Not once did she give any sign of what had happened the night before. It was as if it never happened. But Arman couldn't forget. He started watching her more closely. Every small movement, every pause, every moment of stillness. He noticed how she never ate with him. She would serve the food, place it neatly in front of him, and then just stand there or walk away. He had never actually seen her take a single bite. At first he told himself maybe she ate earlier. Maybe she wasn't hungry. But days passed, and nothing changed. One afternoon he decided to follow her quietly. After setting his meal, Layla walked into the small storage room at the back of the house. Arman waited a few seconds, then moved closer, his steps careful and slow. The door was slightly open. He peeked inside. The room was empty. No Layla. No sound. No movement. Arman pushed the door open fully, his heart starting to race. There was nowhere she could have gone. No windows. No back door. Just four walls and a few old boxes stacked in the corner. "Layla?" he called out louder this time. No answer. A cold feeling crept up his spine. He stepped back quickly, his eyes scanning every corner of the room again, but she was gone. Completely gone. And then, from behind him, he heard the soft clink of metal. Arman turned sharply. Layla was standing in the kitchen. Exactly where she was supposed to be. As if she had never left. His throat went dry. "How?" he started, but the words didn't come out properly. She didn't look at him. Didn't react. Just continued arranging the utensils like nothing had happened. That night, Arman didn't stay inside. For the first time since his marriage, he stepped out after dark and went straight to the old part of the village. The place where people who knew old stories, old warnings, still sat and talked late into the night. He found the same shopkeeper who had warned him before. The old man looked up as Arman approached, and something in his expression changed instantly. "You look different," he said quietly. "Like someone who has started hearing what silence really sounds like." Arman sat down heavily. "There's something wrong with her," he said, his voice low but urgent. "She doesn't speak. She doesn't eat. And today, she disappeared. I saw her go into a room and she was just gone." The shopkeeper didn't seem surprised. Instead, he let out a slow breath and looked around, making sure no one else was listening. "Tell me," he said, leaning closer. "Has she ever tried to speak?" Arman hesitated, then nodded. "Last night," he whispered. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The old man's face grew serious. "That means it's getting closer." "Getting closer to what?" Arman asked, his voice rising slightly. The shopkeeper didn't answer right away. He reached for a small cup of tea, took a slow sip, and then spoke in a tone that felt heavier than before. "Long ago," he began, "people spoke of a kind of silence that wasn't natural. A silence that didn't belong to humans. It was said that some people could carry it. But only for a time." Arman felt his heartbeat quicken. "What are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying," the old man replied, "that not every quiet person is simply quiet. Some are bound to silence. And if that silence is broken..." He stopped mid-sentence. Arman leaned forward. "If it's broken, what happens?" The old man shook his head slowly. "That part of the story," he said, "is not something people like to talk about." A chill ran through Arman. "Who was the man who brought her to me?" he asked suddenly. "Do you know him?" The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed slightly. "No one knows him," he said. "He comes and goes. Always with the same kind of offer. And every time, the story ends the same way." Arman's stomach tightened. "What do you mean, ends the same way?" But before the old man could answer, a loud knock echoed through the quiet street. Both of them turned. Arman's heart skipped a beat. Because even from that distance, he knew that knock. Slow, soft, and perfectly steady. Just like her. Arman's chest tightened as the knocking came again. Slow, even, unhurried. No one in the village knocked like that. The old shopkeeper didn't move. He just looked at Arman, his eyes filled with something close to fear. "You shouldn't have left her alone," he said quietly. Arman swallowed hard. "I had to know what's happening. And now it knows you're asking questions." The knocking didn't stop. It continued, steady as a heartbeat, echoing through the quiet street. Arman stood up, his legs feeling heavier than usual. "I have to go," he said. The shopkeeper grabbed his wrist for a moment. "Listen to me carefully," he whispered. "Whatever you see, whatever you hear, don't ask her to speak. Not even once." Arman frowned, confused. "Why?" But the old man had already let go. "Just go," he said. Arman didn't wait any longer. He walked quickly back home, his mind racing with everything he had just heard. The silence of the village felt different now. Every shadow looked deeper. Every sound felt sharper. When he reached his house, the knocking stopped. The door was slightly open. He stood there for a moment, staring at it. He was sure he had locked it before leaving. Slowly he pushed it open. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "Layla?" he called out. No response. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. Everything looked normal. The table was clean. The utensils were in place. Nothing seemed out of order. But then he noticed something strange. There were wet footprints on the floor. Small. Barefoot. Leading from the door, into the house. Arman followed them slowly. Each step made his heart beat faster. The footprints led down the hallway, toward the bedroom. He paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath before stepping in. Layla was there. Sitting on the edge of the bed. Facing the door. Waiting. Her clothes were slightly damp, and her hair clung to her face as if she had just come in from the rain, even though it hadn't rained all day. Arman felt a chill. "Were you outside?" he asked carefully. She didn't answer. Didn't move. Just kept looking at him with that same calm, unreadable expression. Arman stepped closer. "Did you come to the shop?" he asked. "Were you the one knocking?" For a moment nothing happened. Then slowly, very slowly, Layla tilted her head. Just a little. It wasn't a normal movement. It was too precise. Too controlled. Like someone trying to copy a human gesture without fully understanding it. Arman's throat went dry. "I know you can hear me," he said, his voice lower now. "I know you understand." Her eyes didn't leave his. And then, her lips moved again. Just like the night before. Forming words that made no sound. Arman felt something inside him snap. "What are you trying to say?" he demanded, his voice louder now. "Why won't you speak?" The moment the words left his mouth, he remembered the shopkeeper's warning. Don't ask her to speak. But it was too late. The room seemed to grow colder. Layla's expression didn't change, but something about her presence did. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on everything. Her lips stopped moving. And for the first time, she blinked. Slowly. Deliberately. Arman took a step back without realizing it. "Layla," he said again, softer this time. She stood up. Not quickly. Not suddenly. Just smoothly. Like she had all the time in the world. And then she took a step toward him. Arman's heart pounded in his chest. Another step. He wanted to move, to say something, to do anything, but his body didn't respond. She stopped right in front of him. Close enough that he could feel the coldness coming from her. Then very gently, she raised her hand. Arman flinched slightly, but she didn't touch him. Instead she pointed, past him. Toward the doorway. Arman turned slowly. There was nothing there. Just the empty hallway. When he looked back, Layla was gone. Again. This time, Arman didn't try to understand it. He rushed out of the room, searching every corner of the house, calling her name again and again. But there was no answer. It was like she had vanished into thin air. Hours passed. Night fell. Still no sign of her. Arman sat alone in the dim light of the room, his mind filled with questions that had no answers. Who was she? What had he brought into his home? And what did it mean that she only appeared when she wanted to? As the silence grew deeper, he started to notice something else. A faint sound. Not loud. Not clear. But there. Like a whisper, hidden inside the silence itself. He held his breath, trying to listen. It came again. Soft. Broken. Almost like words. But not quite. Arman stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the room. "Layla," he whispered. The sound stopped. Complete silence again. He ran his hands through his hair, frustration building inside him. "I'm losing my mind," he muttered. But deep down he knew he wasn't. Something was happening. Something he didn't understand. The next morning he made a decision. He wouldn't stay confused anymore. If the shopkeeper knew something, there had to be others who did too. So he went to the oldest part of the village, where stories weren't just stories and silence was never taken lightly. He found an elderly woman sitting outside a small, worn-out house. People said she rarely spoke, but she listened to everything. Arman approached her carefully. "I need help," he said. She looked up at him, her eyes sharp despite her age. You brought silence into your home, she said as if she already knew. Arman felt a chill. You know about this? I know enough, she replied. Then tell me what's happening, he urged. Who is she? Why does she disappear? Why won't she speak? The woman studied him for a long moment before answering. Because she can't, she said simply. Arman frowned. What do you mean she can't? The woman leaned back slightly. There are stories, she said, of people who are chosen to carry silence. Not by choice, but by fate. They are given a condition. As long as they remain silent, everything stays as it is. And if they don't? Arman asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked away, her expression turning distant. When silence breaks, she finally said, it doesn't just become sound. It becomes something else. Arman's heart pounded. Something else like what? But the woman shook her head. You're asking questions you're not ready to hear answers to, she said. I need to know. Arman insisted. This is my life. The woman's gaze returned to him, steady and calm. No, she said quietly. This is no longer just your life. Arman stepped back slightly. What does that mean? He asked. But before she could respond, a familiar feeling washed over him. That same cold presence. That same heavy silence. He turned slowly. And there, across the narrow street, Layla was standing, watching him, perfectly still. And this time, she wasn't alone. There was something behind her. Not fully visible. Not clear. Just a shape. A shadow that didn't quite match hers. Arman's breath caught in his throat. When he looked back at the old woman, she was already staring at Layla. And for the first time, fear showed on her face. That, she whispered, is why some silences should never be brought home. Arman couldn't look away. Layla stood across the street, still and silent, her eyes fixed on him. But it wasn't just her anymore. That shadow behind her, it didn't move like a normal shadow. It felt separate, like it had its own presence, its own intention. The air around them seemed to tighten. Don't go near her, the old woman whispered sharply. But Arman barely heard her. His feet moved on their own. One step, then another. Arman, the woman called again, louder this time. If you walk toward her now, you may not walk back the same. He stopped for a second. Just a second. But Layla shifted slightly, and that was enough to pull him forward again. She turned, slowly, and began walking away. Not running. Not rushing. Just walking, as if she knew he would follow. And he did. Through narrow streets, past closed doors, past people who seemed to disappear the moment he looked at them. It felt like the entire village had gone quiet, watching from behind walls and windows. Layla didn't look back. But she knew. Arman could feel it. The deeper they went, the more unfamiliar everything became. This wasn't the part of the village he knew. The houses looked older, worn down, like they had been standing long before anyone remembered. The silence here was different. Heavier. Alive. Layla finally stopped in front of an abandoned house at the edge of the village. The door hung slightly open. The same way his door had been earlier. Arman's steps slowed. Something inside him screamed to stop, to turn around, to go back. But another part of him, the part that needed answers, pushed him forward. Layla stepped inside and disappeared into the darkness. Arman stood at the entrance, staring into the dim space. The light from outside barely reached inside. It felt like the house swallowed it. Layla, he called softly. No response. Of course. He stepped in. The air inside was cold, thick with a strange stillness. The floor creaked under his feet, louder than it should have been, as if the house wanted him to hear every step. Why are you bringing me here? He asked, even though he didn't expect an answer. For a moment nothing happened. Then, a faint movement. At the far end of the room, Layla stood there, waiting. But this time, something was different. That shadow behind her was clearer now. It wasn't just a shape anymore. It was taller than her. Wider. And it didn't match her movements. When she stood still, it shifted. When she tilted her head, it remained straight. Arman felt his heart pound harder. What is that? He whispered. Layla didn't move. But the shadow, it did. It stretched slightly along the wall as if reacting to his voice. Arman took a step back. I don't understand, he said, shaking his head. What do you want from me? Layla slowly raised her hand again, just like before, and pointed, not at the door this time, but at the ground, right between them. Arman hesitated. Why? He asked. She didn't respond. Instead, her lips began to move again. Faster this time. More urgent. Still no sound. But this time, Arman felt something. A pressure. Like the words were there, just blocked. His ears rang slightly as if trying to catch something that refused to be heard. "Say it," he said without thinking. "Just say it." The moment the words left his mouth, everything changed. The air dropped colder. The faint ringing in his ears turned sharp. And the shadow behind Layla shifted violently. Arman stumbled back. Layla froze. Her lips stopped moving instantly. And for the first time, her expression changed. Not fear. Not anger. Something deeper. Something like warning. The shadow pulled away from her. Not completely, but enough to make it clear. It wasn't just attached to her. It was with her. And now, was aware of him. Arman's breath became uneven. "What did I just do?" he muttered. The floor beneath him creaked again. But this time, it wasn't from his movement. It was from something else. Something below. A low, almost silent vibration spread through the room. Arman looked down. The ground where Layla had pointed seemed slightly cracked, as if something had been sealed there, and was now responding. He stepped back quickly. But the cracks didn't stop. They spread slowly, thin lines moving across the floor like veins. Layla took a sudden step forward. Her movement was sharper now, less controlled, more urgent. She shook her head slightly, the first clear sign of resistance he had ever seen from her, as if she was trying to tell him, "Stop." But it was too late. The shadow moved again. This time it stretched toward the cracks. Not slowly, not carefully, but with purpose. The temperature in the room dropped even more. Arman's hands felt cold, his breath visible. "What is happening?" he said, panic rising in his voice. Layla reached out toward him. Not to point, not to guide, but to stop him. Yet she didn't touch him. She couldn't. There was always that small distance, that invisible gap. And now it felt more real than ever. The cracks on the floor grew wider. And from within them, that same faint whisper returned. But louder now. Not clear. Still broken. But closer to becoming words. Arman covered his ears instinctively. "Make it stop," he shouted. Layla's eyes widened. The shadow reacted instantly. It pulled back sharply. Then surged forward again. Stronger. Faster. Like something had just crossed a line. The walls of the house seemed to tremble slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air felt unstable. Arman staggered, trying to keep his balance. "What do you want from me?" he shouted again, this time louder, almost desperate. Layla's lips moved one last time. Slower now. Clear. And this time, Arman almost understood. Almost. But not fully. And somehow, that made it worse. Because whatever she was trying to say, it felt like the only thing that could stop all of this. The shadow rose higher behind her. Larger. More defined. And for a brief moment, it looked like it was turning. Not toward Layla, but toward him. Arman's heart slammed against his chest. The whispers grew louder. The cracks spread further. And the silence he once wanted so badly, was no longer empty. It was breaking. The whispers didn't stop. They grew. Layer by layer, like many voices trying to speak at once through a wall that was starting to crack. Arman dropped his hands from his ears because it didn't matter anymore. The sound wasn't just outside him now. It felt like it was inside his head. "Layla," he said, his voice unsteady. "What is this place?" But even as he asked, something deep inside him already knew. This wasn't just a random abandoned house. This was connected to her. To the silence. To everything he had ignored. Layla didn't move toward him anymore. She stood frozen, her eyes wide, her body tense in a way he had never seen before. The calm, quiet presence she always carried was gone. In its place was urgency, and something close to fear. The shadow behind her stretched higher, touching the wall, then the ceiling as if it was outgrowing the space. And then, it separated. Not completely, but enough. Enough for Arman to see that it had its own shape now. Its own form. It wasn't just following her anymore. It was choosing. Arman stumbled backward, his breath quick and shallow. "This isn't real," he muttered, but his voice didn't carry any belief. The cracked floor let out a faint sound, like something shifting beneath it. And suddenly a memory hit him. Not something he saw. Something he felt. A strange familiarity. Like he had been here before. His head throbbed slightly. He blinked, trying to focus. And for a brief moment, the room looked different. Not broken. Not abandoned. But whole. Alive. The walls were cleaner. The air warmer. The silence softer. Arman froze. "What?" he whispered. The vision flickered. Gone. Back to the cold, cracked room. His heart pounded harder. No, he said, shaking his head. That's not possible. But the feeling didn't leave. Instead, it grew stronger. A sense of déjà vu that made his chest tighten. He turned slowly toward Layla. You've been here before? He said, almost to himself. Her eyes locked onto his instantly. And for the first time, she nodded. It was small. Barely noticeable. But it was clear. Arman's breath caught. You brought me here for a reason, he said, stepping forward again despite everything inside him telling him not to. This place, it means something. The whispers shifted. Not louder, but clearer. Still broken. Still incomplete. But closer to words than before. And suddenly, Arman felt it again. That strange pull. Not from the room. Not from Layla. But from the ground beneath him. Like something was calling him. Recognizing him. No, he said, stepping back again. This doesn't make sense. I've never been here. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. The memory flickered again. Stronger this time. A door. A voice. A choice. Arman grabbed his head, wincing slightly. What is happening to me? Layla took a step closer. Faster this time. Desperate. She shook her head again, more firmly now, her eyes filled with urgency. Her lips moved quickly, trying again to form the words she couldn't speak. Arman focused on her. Tried to read her lips. But it was like trying to catch water with his hands. Slipping away every time. Say it, he said again, frustration breaking through his fear. Whatever it is, just say it. The moment echoed. Just like before. But this time, the reaction was immediate. The shadow snapped toward him. Fast. Too fast. Arman stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance as the air around him seemed to shift violently. The whispers turned sharp again, almost like they were reacting to his demand. Layla reached out again. Closer than before. But still not touching. Still that invisible barrier between them. And then, the floor beneath Arman gave a low crack. He froze. Slowly, carefully he looked down. The cracks had spread into a shape now. Not random. Not natural. A pattern. A circle. Right beneath his feet. His breath caught. I didn't, he started, but the words faded. Because something else was happening. The whispers, they were changing. One voice started to stand out. Faint. But different. Closer. And then, it spoke. Not clearly. Not fully. But enough. You. Arman's eyes widened. What? He whispered. The voice came again. Stronger this time. You came back. His heart stopped for a moment. Came back? He repeated, shaking his head. No. No, I've never been here before. But the room didn't agree. The air grew heavier. The shadow stilled for a second, as if listening. And then slowly, it turned. Not toward Layla. Not toward the cracks. But directly toward Arman. And for the first time, it felt like it was seeing him. Not as a stranger. But as something familiar. Something it had been waiting for. Layla's reaction was instant. She stepped in front of him. Shielding him. Her body rigid, her movements no longer calm but protective. Arman stared at her in shock. Why are you? He stopped. Because another memory hit him. Stronger. Clear. Not a feeling this time. An image. Himself. Standing in this very place. Speaking to someone he couldn't see. Making a promise. Or, was it a deal? Arman gasped slightly, stumbling back. No, he said again, his voice trembling. That's not real. But deep down, he knew it was. Layla turned her head slightly toward him. And this time, her eyes weren't just warning him. They were pleading. As if she wanted him to remember. To understand. Before it was too late. The voice beneath the floor came again. Clearer now. Stronger. You've left. Arman's chest tightened. What did I leave? He asked, his voice barely steady. The cracks widened slightly. The circle beneath him darkened. And the whisper answered. Me. Silence followed. Heavy. Breathing. Alive. Arman felt the ground shift slightly under his feet. And in that moment, everything changed. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just connected to Layla anymore. It was connected to him. And somehow, he had always been a part of it. Arman felt the truth before he fully understood it. The ground beneath him, the whispers, the shadow. None of it felt like something new anymore. It felt familiar. Too familiar. Like a mistake he had forgotten, but never escaped. His chest tightened as he looked at Layla standing in front of him, still shielding him, still trying to stop something that was clearly getting stronger. You knew, he said slowly, his voice shaking. You knew all along. Her eyes didn't deny it. They couldn't. Another memory hit him, clearer than before. Not just an image this time, but a moment. Years ago. Before this marriage. Before this quiet life he thought he wanted. He had come to this very place. Desperate. Tired of noise, of conflict, of a life that felt out of control. And someone had answered him. Not a person. Something else. A presence hidden in silence. It had offered him exactly what he wanted. A quiet life. No arguments. No chaos. Just stillness. But not for free. Arman staggered slightly as the memory settled in. I made a deal, he whispered. The whispers around him grew louder, almost like they were agreeing. You chose? The voice from beneath the floor echoed. His breathing became uneven. What did I give? He asked, though part of him already feared the answer. The shadow behind Layla shifted again, stretching wider, darker, as if feeding off the moment. And then, the truth came. A voice, for silence. Arman's eyes widened. No, he said immediately. No, I never. But the memory didn't let him lie. He saw it now, clear as day. He had agreed to give up the voice of the one who would share his life. Not his own voice. Not his life. Someone else's. A quiet wife. A silent home. A perfect peace. His stomach dropped. That's not, he started, but the words failed. Because it was exactly what he had asked for. Layla slowly lowered her head. Not in shame. But in acceptance. She had never been meant to speak. Not because she couldn't, but because her voice had been taken. Given. By him. Arman felt a wave of guilt crash over him. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. The voice beneath him responded instantly. You wanted silence. The cracks beneath his feet widened further. The circle now clearly visible. The air felt heavier than ever. And now, the whisper seemed to ask, though it wasn't spoken clearly. Arman looked at Layla. Really looked at her. For the first time, not as the quiet wife he wanted, but as a person who had been living inside his choice. Her silence. Her distance. Her strange, empty presence. It all made sense now. She wasn't just quiet. She was trapped. And the shadow, Arman said, turning slowly toward it. It loomed behind her, darker than before, stronger, almost complete. That's what's holding it, isn't it? The shadow shifted slightly, as if acknowledging him. Balance, the voice whispered. Arman understood. The silence had a cost. It needed something to hold it together. That shadow, whatever it was, had been bound to her, keeping the silence intact, keeping the deal unbroken. Until now, because he had started questioning, pushing, asking her to speak, breaking the one condition that held everything in place. Layla stepped closer to him, closer than ever before. That invisible gap between them felt thinner now, almost gone. Her lips moved again, slower, clear. And this time, Arman understood. Let it end? His breath caught. You want to break it? He asked softly. She held his gaze, and nodded. But the moment she did, the shadow reacted violently. It surged forward, pulling away from her completely. The room shook slightly. The cracks spread faster. The whispers turned chaotic. No balance, the voice beneath the floor warned. No silence. Arman felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. If he broke the deal, the silence would end. Layla would be free. But whatever had been contained by that silence would be free too. The shadow stood between them now, taller, stronger, no longer tied to her. Its presence filled the room, and for the first time, it felt dangerous. Arman's mind raced. This is why you brought me here, he said, looking at Layla. Because only I can end it. She didn't need to answer. He already knew. The deal had been his. So the choice had to be his too. The whispers grew louder. The shadow shifted closer. The cracks beneath him pulsed slightly. Time felt like it was running out. Arman closed his eyes for a moment. Thinking, feeling, regretting. I wanted peace, he said quietly. But I didn't understand what peace really means. He opened his eyes again, and looked at Layla. I won't trap you in my mistake anymore. The moment he said it, the air changed. The circle beneath him lit faintly. The shadow surged forward. But Layla moved too, faster than before. She stepped directly into it, not to fight it, but to face it. And in that moment, Arman spoke clearly. I break the deal. Everything stopped. For 1 second. Complete silence. The kind he had always wanted. But now, It felt empty. Then, a sharp sound. Like something snapping. The crack spread completely across the floor. The shadow froze. Then shattered. Not into pieces, but into nothing. Gone. Just like that. The pressure lifted instantly. The air felt lighter. The whispers disappeared. The room fell still. Arman stood there, breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. Slowly, he turned to Layla. She stood there, unmoving, quiet, just like before. For a brief moment, fear returned. Layla, he said carefully, and then, she took a breath, a real one. Her lips parted, and for the first time, she spoke, soft, barely above a whisper, but clear. Arman. His eyes filled with shock, relief, disbelief. You can talk, he said, almost laughing in disbelief. She nodded slightly, her voice still fragile. It's over. The weight he had been carrying lifted instantly. Everything felt normal again. Too normal. The house. The silence. The air. As if nothing had ever happened. Arman let out a long breath, running his hand through his hair. It's finally done. But Layla didn't smile. Her expression didn't change. Instead, she looked past him, toward the floor. Arman frowned slightly. What is it? He asked. She didn't answer right away. And when she finally spoke again, her voice was steady. But her words made his blood run cold. It wasn't just my voice you gave away, she said. Arman froze. What do you mean? Layla slowly met his eyes. And this time, there was no silence. No barrier. Just truth. You asked for a quiet life, she said softly. And now, you have it. Arman's heart skipped. I don't understand. But deep down, he already did. He turned his head slightly, listening, waiting. But there was nothing. No wind. No distant sounds. No movement. The village was silent. Completely. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just empty. Arman stepped outside slowly. His breath caught. The streets were deserted. Doors open. No people. No voices. Nothing. He turned back toward Layla, panic rising in his chest. What did we do? He asked. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. And then she said quietly, You got what you always wanted. The silence he had chased had finally arrived. But this time, it wasn't something he could escape. Arman stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the empty street. The same village that once felt alive, full of voices, footsteps, distant chatter, now felt like a place that had been paused in time. A door creaked slightly in the distance, but even that sound faded too quickly, like it didn't belong here anymore. No, he whispered, shaking his head. This isn't real. But it was. He stepped outside slowly, his feet heavy, his chest tight. Hello, he called out. His voice echoed. Too clearly. Too loudly. There was no one to answer. No movement from any house. No sign of life. Just stillness stretching in every direction. Arman turned in a slow circle, his breathing becoming uneven. Where is everyone? He said louder this time. Behind him, Layla stepped out quietly. They're gone, she said. Her voice was still soft, but now it carried weight. Every word felt real and final. Arman looked at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Gone where? That doesn't make any sense. She didn't rush to answer. She looked around the empty village as if taking it in for the first time herself, not as a silent presence, but as someone who could finally feel it. When the silence broke, she said slowly, it didn't just end the deal, it took what was holding it together. Arman frowned, struggling to understand. Holding what together? She met his eyes. The balance. The word hit him harder than he expected. He remembered what the voice had said. What the old stories had warned. Silence wasn't empty. It was something that had been held in place. And when I broke it, Arman said, his voice dropping. There was nothing left to keep things as they were, Layla finished. A heavy realization settled in his chest. All those whispers. That shadow. That presence beneath the ground. It hadn't just been trapped. It had been containing something. Or maybe, it had been the thing that kept everything normal. Arman ran a hand over his face, trying to steady himself. So what now? He asked. Do they come back? Is this temporary? Layla didn't answer right away. That silence again, but now it felt different. Not forced. Not unnatural. Just quiet. I don't know, she said honestly. That was somehow worse. Arman walked slowly down the street, looking into open doorways, empty windows, places where people should have been. Every step made the silence feel louder. This is my fault, he said quietly. Layla followed him, her steps light. It wasn't just you, she said. You didn't understand what you were choosing. But I still chose it, he replied. He stopped in the middle of the road and looked up at the sky. Even the birds were gone. I wanted a quiet life so badly. I didn't care what it meant, he said. I didn't think about what silence really is. Layla stood beside him now. For a long time I couldn't speak, she said. But I could feel everything. I could see what was happening, and I couldn't stop it. Arman looked at her, guilt filling his eyes. And you still stayed. She nodded slightly. Because I was part of it too. He lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out at the empty village again, her expression calm but thoughtful. Silence isn't wrong, she said after a moment. But when it comes from taking something away, it always asks for more. Arman let those words settle. Made sense now. The peace he thought he wanted had never been real. It had been built on something missing, something taken. And eventually, it had taken more than he expected. They walked back toward their house slowly, neither of them speaking for a while. The familiar place didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't just quiet, it felt hollow. Arman stopped at the door, hesitating before stepping inside. Do you think we can fix this? He asked. Layla looked at him carefully. I think, she said, choosing her words, that some things don't go back to how they were. He nodded slowly. That answer didn't give him hope, but it gave him something real. They stepped inside together. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel forced. It felt shared. Arman sat down, resting his elbows on his knees, his mind still racing. What do we do now? He asked. Layla sat across from him. Now, we live with what's left, she said. Her voice was steady. Not afraid. Just certain. Arman leaned back, exhaling slowly. For the first time he wasn't chasing silence, or trying to escape it. He was just there. With it. After a while he spoke again. At least you can talk now, he said, a small, tired smile forming. Layla looked at him and for the first time, she smiled back. It was soft, real, and completely different from the quiet stillness she had before. Yes, she said. Now I can. The room felt quiet again. But this time it didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel alive in a threatening way. Just was. Arman looked around, then back at her. I guess I finally got my quiet life, he said. There was a pause. And then Layla replied gently. Yes, but now you understand what it costs. Arman nodded. And that understanding stayed with him. Because sometimes what we wish for comes true. Just not in the way we expect. And sometimes silence isn't peace at all. It's the absence of everything we didn't realize we needed.